Coming to you from Southern California, this is Mindset. I'm your host, James Curtis. On today's show,
you may call it the Christmas season.
Or the holiday season.
But for some people, it's the office party season, and some holiday office parties get out of control.
Bosses hitting on interns, or a case when a manager gave a direct report a sexually explicit gift.
Coworkers passed out on toilets with a bottle of whiskey between their legs. I've seen stuff stolen from restaurants by people who had too much to drink. You know, when I originally wrote the tweet, I wrote grinded with, but I mean, she was not a willing participant. It was grinding on the CEO's wife, and that was his last day working at the company. He actually stripped down to his underwear. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know how to react or what to do.
Those were excerpts from a story that I heard last week on National Public Radio, NPR, entitled Mischief Under the Mistletoe, Office Party Goers Behaving Badly. You can find a link to the entire story on our Facebook page, mindset.com/mindset show page. When I heard that story, I got to thinking about what happens at office parties during the holidays. We've all seen it, we've heard about it, or perhaps even have done some of it ourselves. So I wanted to delve into what goes on with people and with companies that lead to what has to be some of the most bizarre behavior done by people who do not have, or at least as far as we know, a diagnosis of a serious mental illness. And I found some answers.
I'm Jim Quick, professor of leadership and organizational behavior, Gouldsby Faust Endowed Chair at the University of Texas at Arlington, and fellow of the Lancaster Leadership Center, Lancaster University, England.
My interview and conversation with Professor Quick started with a very basic question. Is it just the alcohol in the atmosphere? Is it simply a matter of these are underlying issues that people have going on with them anyway, and the combination of alcohol and the festive atmosphere just helps them come out? Or is there something else going on? Is there more to it than that?
No, actually, I don't think it's, I think you, in a sense, have captured it, and it's not more complicated than that. Human beings, and it doesn't matter whether you're CEO at the top of the organization or you're an entry-level employee, we're all put together psychologically the same way.
And what exactly is that basic psychological makeup? It is, of course, made up of our experiences.
We accumulate frustrations and conflicts on a regular, ongoing basis. It's part of the human condition. We have a certain amount of inhibition. We repress a certain amount of our urges and drives and feelings in order to get along in social discourse. And that's actually a functional and a healthy thing.
But when those inhibitions come in contact with the jovial, festive, alcohol-rich atmosphere of a holiday party, it can bring out the lowering of our psychological guard.
What happens with alcohol, and we have called it, my brother and I, my brother's an MD, Master's in Public Health, and so in one of the articles we referred to alcohol as an accelerant for conflicts. It's a depressant, and what it functionally does is it knocks out a certain amount of inhibition. And so with our psychological guard down, then some of the accumulated conflicts and issues emotionally that we have been able to manage and repress or otherwise channel can get out of hand. When those get out of hand, we can get in serious trouble.
So, all of those slings and arrows of the workplace, whether it be a problem with a manager or a coworker or some other work condition, whether it be wages or something else, all those things can come and are what come erupting to the surface.
And I know of a couple of cases where tenured professors have come close to losing tenure contracts over behavior acted out because of the influence of alcohol knocking out the inhibitions.
At its core, is this simply an issue of managing the day-to-day mental health challenges that we all face?
Yeah, I would put this primarily.
Before we get to Professor Quick's response, a note. Occasionally on the program, our guests come up with what I think is just a really cool new phrase and a way to look at our behavior, not as odd or strange, but in the range of what he calls broad normal.
People that accumulate conflicts and emotional issues are not necessarily psychologically disturbed or abnormal. All human beings have the same psychological processes in this regard. And Freud was pretty clear about that, and I think he was accurate about that. So it falls in the broad normal range. Human beings have been in conflicts ever since we've been on the face of the earth. So that doesn't make somebody abnormal or pathological simply because they have conflicted issues they haven't resolved.
What do we do about that as individuals, as friends of people who we may very well and rightfully suspect have some underlying conflict, some underlying tension, and are about to go into a situation where those underlying issues are going to come to the surface, even though work parties are, in effect, an extension of the workplace?
One of the powerful things is catharsis. And James Pennebaker, who's chair of the psych department at UT Austin, his work looked at the power of confession or expressive writing, and it's the processing or releasing of these conflicts in healthy and appropriate channels, so that people that do diary writing, for example, can express their conflicts and their issues and their deep emotions in the diaries and then leave it there in the diary. It's a way of kind of cleaning out or, as I say, experiencing the catharsis of the release of the conflicted emotion.
To my fellow Catholics and all the other people that have a faith tradition of confession, it seems like, at least on this point, God and science, for the skeptics, have come together. But you can apparently get the same benefit from talking to a friend, or at least one you can trust. And of course, there's always talking to a therapist.
So it's done through a time-honored tradition of confessionals in some faith traditions, people in very close relationships, and it's really important to, when you start confessing things to people, to make sure that these people are ones who can hold the confidentiality you're expressing to them. So it's a very important confidential relationship.
And if talking just isn't for you, and certainly talking may not be the answer for those of us who have people we can confide in all the time, there's another source for your frustration, for your anxiety, taking out on, say, a softball that you can hit as hard as you possibly can.
Another healthy release is the exercise activity, which channels the energy. I had a sergeant ask me one time why I played badminton at noon, and I said, better I hit the bird at noon than your head in the afternoon, Jim. And he laughed and said, yeah, that's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the only purpose of exercising and working irritations and conflicts, but channeling frustration and conflict through physical means is one appropriate way to discharge the energy. But what you're talking about are some unhealthy channels to get triggered because we've allowed those conflicts, rather than to be processed and channeled in a healthy way, they spill over into real inappropriate and at times dangerous kind of behaviors.
Now, in Professor Quick's defense, I'm sure that he didn't really mean hitting the head of his subordinate. I'm pretty sure he didn't mean that. So, the problem when those company parties go a bit sideways, and my question was as to why, when I asked Professor Quick this, it seemed to come down to that idea of letting those dangerous behaviors get out of hand and not channeling them properly. So this isn't something that comes up all of a sudden. This isn't the idea of sometimes people just behave badly. Well, I take issue with that. I don't think it's sometimes people just decide to behave badly. There are things going on with us, things that are not resolved, problems with the workplace, problems with a coworker, problems with perhaps even our personal life from any number of sources. And like most situations, if they're not dealt with appropriately, they bubble over. Is it necessary that people be mindful of the process of, look, this boss gets on my last nerve. If he says fill in the blank to me one more time, I'm going to punch his face in, figuratively, even though it may be a real emotion. There's some stuff that's bothering me, and when I go do journaling or hitting a shuttlecock, that I'm releasing that. Or if you just go do some of these activities, will that take care of it?
You don't have to consciously be thinking that that's what you're doing, but that may help too. And it is important to be aware of what conflicts are troubling or unresolved for you on a regular basis. I think Freud was correct about that too, that we really should have an internal conversation going on a pretty regular basis to know what's frustrating or conflicted with us so that we can make choices about what we do with that. When somebody goes to a holiday party, has a drink, and all of a sudden they're acting out issues that they're not in touch with themselves, that can get them and other people into an awful lot of trouble. And everybody that has a drink and has their inhibitions lowered does not necessarily act out. They maybe have a good time, they become more relaxed, and they don't have issues or conflicts internally that ultimately are going to get them in trouble.
So is the best approach to have that internal conversation that you spoke about on a regular basis and be really aware of the things that are really getting under your skin?
Yeah, absolutely. And make a note of that, put it somewhere, and actively kind of manage it, as opposed to allowing it to manage you.
So now, here's the second cool phrase that came up with my conversation, with Professor Quick. And it involves a word that we normally associate with terrorism. Yes, terrorism. The word is hijack. And in a way, I think that the terrorism context may actually fit here. The thing is, it comes from, that is, this terrorism idea, this hijacking idea, from within us, from a part of our own brain.
Ultimately, what you do not want is an amygdala hijack. My partner, Deborah Nelson, in our collaborative work, she likes to do the emotional competence education stuff in the brain chemistry. The amygdala hijacks the brain, and people start acting out and doing things that are inappropriate. That gets them in all kinds of trouble. And it's much easier to have an amygdala hijack if your inhibitions have been low.